You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today's episode is about when love and harm coexist, understanding your husband's toxic childhood. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast is your sanctuary for navigating the sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws, while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hi, Miriam Susan here. Welcome to today's episode where we're going to be kind of looking at what it was like to grow up when love and harm coexist in your husband's toxic childhood. If your husband is anything like mine, he probably would not even necessarily classify his childhood as being abusive. Yet there were patterns of behaviors that have existed in his family since basically before he was even born. So the scripture reference for today's episode is from 1 Corinthians 13:11 from the New Revised Standard Version, Catholic Edition. And it says, "When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways." Your husband probably has certain memories that he just lights up about when he thinks about his childhood. Maybe it was some special family camping trips. Maybe it was trips to the beach. Maybe it was theme park vacations. Maybe it was just having fun doing certain activities throughout the year or Christmas gatherings. But those same parents who created those fond memories that your husband has may also be the people that criticize every decision that he makes as an adult. And so you're sitting there thinking, how can both things be true? How can his parents say these things about my husband and yet have been these kind and loving people that my husband remembers from his childhood? So today we're going to be talking about something that has often made my head spin, but once I understood it, it really changed everything, and it could change everything for you as well. There is this confusion of mixed childhood experiences. Your husband very likely felt that he was genuinely loved in many moments, and he was loved in those moments in the way that his parents could show it. Now, these same parents who maybe took him on fishing trips, took him to Mass every Sunday, took him to soccer practice, also made him feel that he could never measure up. And of course, all of these things are generalizations. Not every toxic in-laws around the country, around the world, are going to fit this pattern. But this is a very common one among those of us who married into these toxic families, is that we have these husbands who do feel like their childhood was not that bad. Yeah, there were certain issues, but nothing really that bad because there were these wonderful memories. And one of the issues is that a child's brain does not categorize good parent versus bad parent. They just experience, these are my parents. This is my family. This is how things are. And so your husband's loving and fond and cherished memories, they don't cancel out the harmful patterns that existed back then and that exist now. So why is this the case? Why is this that, our husband remembers these things and can't seem to wrap his brain around that the people that are tied to his childhood memories can also be doing hateful and ugly and even abusive things now? Well, it's something called the highlight reel effect. I want you to think about how you remember family vacations, because we mostly remember the best parts, right? We don't remember the travel delays unless there was something especially momentous that happened. We don't remember all the trials and tribulations or the arguments and the fighting and the stress of getting packed up or the stress of getting back home. We just remember the highlights. And so our husbands' brains naturally are going to hold on to those moments where he felt like he was being genuinely loved and accepted. Things like Christmas morning, birthday celebration, family events, those create especially powerful emotional implants in our brains. But those peak moments that happen in most of our lives don't erase the day-to-day patterns of criticism, of manipulation, especially emotional manipulation, of control from what's going on in these relationships. Love and harm can happen in the same household, and sometimes it even happens in the same conversation. And now, how children process these messages is very different than how an adult would. Just like the scripture from 1 Corinthians says, when I was a child, I thought like a child. And so a child's brain is not equipped to think, my parents love me, but they're also hurting me. Instead, when things like this happen, children just think, well, this is just how families work. Or maybe they internalize it and think, well, I deserve how I'm being treated. So your husband learned to be grateful and to look forward to those good moments in his life and to really minimize or forget the painful ones. In fact, my husband and I were talking about this one time, and he said that whenever good times were happening, sometimes he couldn't even enjoy it because he knew that there was going to be some fallout coming, some really dramatic, chaotic circumstance was going to be following it. But when he was in the chaos, when he was in the getting grounded for ridiculous things over and over again, 3 weeks, for talking back or whatever it was, in those moments of chaos, he looked forward to the good that he knew was going to be coming, because all these things were very cyclical. And if you are familiar with the cycles of abuse, that is a very familiar pattern. Things blow up, there is blaming, usually never on the person who caused the drama. Then there's a makeup period, which is the good time, and then there's the quiet period. And then there's the blow up, and then there's the blaming, and then there's the good period, and then the quiet. And it just cycles over and over and over again. So my husband was trained to not necessarily hate or dread the bad times, because he knew after the bad times came something good. And that's pretty messed up. But that was very insightful for me, though, to know that that's how he thought. And so it's very likely that he's not the only one, of course, that thinks this way. It's very likely that many of our husbands who have this toxic pattern from their childhood are kind of thinking that same way, even if they don't realize it. The blind spot that happens in adults is because these childhood coping strategies, this looking forward to, or not necessarily dreading the bad because they know the good is going to follow, or really not being able to enjoy the good because they know the bad is going to follow, that's still running in the background of your husband's adult mind. When his parents now show him what appears to be love, it could trigger that same childhood relief. And they think internally, okay, see, they do love me. They do love me because they're showing me love right now, even if that love is really love bombing. And if you're not familiar with love bombing, it's a tactic that abusive people do to try to get you in, to like pull you in, to get you on their side, to get you to see things their way, to agree with them. But it's all a manipulation tactic. When your husband sees that his parents are being critical or controlling or manipulative or undermining your authority as your children's parents, then his brain may be defaulting to, I've done something wrong. I have done something terribly wrong. And he literally cannot see this pattern because his nervous system is still in that mode wanting to earn his parents' love. And again, these are generalizations just so you can be aware that this could be going on with your husband. I'm not saying that these are definitively what's going on. Obviously, only a trained psychologist or therapist can do those kinds of things, but I just want you to become aware of what may be happening. So when I say is, I really mean is possible or could be happening. So this is why your husband can get defensive when you point out the behavior of his parents, because what's happening is that you're threatening his childhood survival system. This is a system that your husband could have developed to just survive his childhood and try to keep the peace with his parents, whoever was the especially toxic one, to keep them from being upset with him. And so he is going to get defensive when you point out their behavior, because you're shedding light on a thought process that is critical to his now existence. And that's very threatening. So what does this look like in real time? Well, let's say your mother-in-law criticizes your parenting, and then the next day she brings your kids a special gift or a special treat, or takes them out to do something fun the next day. Or let's say his dad undermines a decision that you and your husband made together, but then he tells a funny story and everybody laughs. What your husband remembers is the gift and the laughter, and he minimizes the criticism and files it away in his brain as, well, it wasn't that bad. Meanwhile, we are seeing the manipulation clearly because we don't have the decades of conditioning that our husbands have, and we're trained in order to overlook that kind of stuff. So he's operating from what could be a childhood emotional memory and a memory pattern, while we are seeing present day adult behavior. Because a lot of the times our husbands revert back to that little boy and that dynamic. The parents are these powerful authoritarian figures, and our husbands are just the little boy. And they're never, ever seen as equals. I mean, that's been our experience. And my husband has never been seen as an equal to his parents, even though we've been together for 30 years. We have 6 children, and 4 of them are adults. But yet we can never quite get to that equal status. No, his parents always have seen themselves, based on how we've been treated, as superior to us, and we are inferior to them. So your husband is still operating, if he's in this cycle, if this is true for him, he is still existing and operating from that childhood emotional memory pattern. This is super important to understand for your marriage, because you're not fighting against his love for his parents. What you're up against is decades of psychological conditioning. His fond memories that he has, they are real and they are valid, but they're also being used, either consciously or not, to excuse the current harmful behavior that you are enduring right now. So understanding this should help you realize it's not about you being too sensitive. It's about your husband not being able to see the full picture, because the lenses he's looking through are those of a child. Now, it's not to say that your husband is childish. No, what I'm saying is that these thought patterns are so firmly ingrained that it takes a lot for him to put down those glasses that he's been using to see his parents and pick up ones that are his true prescription, the ones that need to be right now for his parents with him as an adult. Now, the goal for us as wives should never be to destroy any good memories that our husbands have, but we need to help him see that any past love, any past good memories that he has does not justify the present disrespect, the present controlling behavior, the present manipulation, the present toxic and abusive behavior. Now, a parent can genuinely love their child and still create unhealthy patterns that damages that child's adult relationship. Your husband may have these warm childhood memories and them be proof of love, but we have to remember that it's not a permission slip for ongoing boundary violations in your marriage. This little boy inside your husband still craves the approval of his parents, even though he is a grown man. And he's going to defend his parents because he believes that the love he received was real, but so was the harm. And he can't see their current behavior as problematic because it feels normal, because it feels familiar. So even though it's not normal, it is familiar. And because it's familiar, it feels normal. Our husbands will, at some point, if they are willing to see things as they are, have this internal conflict where he feels like these people love me, and also feels like, why do I feel so awful after spending time with them? Why do I dread when a visit is coming up? Why do I feel like I've been sucker punched in the stomach after I talk to him on the phone? This often can leave us as wives feeling like we are fighting against ghosts from his childhood. We are fighting against these memories of people that maybe we don't even believe existed. Maybe we don't even believe that our in-laws are even capable of truly showing genuine, authentic, unconditional love, and they never have been. But that's not how our husbands likely have interpreted their childhood. And so we feel like we're fighting against something that we cannot even see. And it's really hard to even prove. So what does this mean for us as the wives? Well, again, we are not competing with his parents, but we are dealing with some unprocessed childhood experiences that our husbands have. And his loyalty to his parents isn't really necessarily about him choosing his parents over you, but it is about these mental patterns of thought that were created out of survival in our husband's childhood. And when we point out the toxic behavior in our in-laws to our husbands, it can very often feel like we are attacking his core identity. Because a lot of our husbands have an enmeshed relationship with their parents. And so if we attack the parents, he is going to feel like we are attacking him too. And there is this level of exhaustion that unless you've experienced it, it is so hard to explain because we are just trying to make sense of everything. And we have to deal with the fact that our husband's parents say that they love him. Now, for my personal situation, I do believe that my in-laws think that they love my husband, but I believe that their definition of love is very, very different than mine. So I feel like they can be very genuine and say that they love my husband, that they love me, that they love our children, that they love anybody. But their definition of love is not the same as mine. I don't think they're trying to be necessarily deceptive in that way, but just that their definition is very different. And so it's very hard to reconcile that, isn't it? When my definition of love is unconditional love, genuinely seeking the good for somebody else, wanting what is best for them, whether I like it or not. But for my in-laws, their love appears to me as I want to use you to make myself look or feel better, and I will do nice things for you if you comply with my wishes. That's what their love feels like to me. We are not being too sensitive about his family. We are just operating from a different perspective, and we can see things very differently than our husbands do because we are on the outside looking in. And we actually had a therapist that we were working with, and he actually told my husband, he's like, your wife can see these things very clearly because she didn't grow up like this. I can see these clearly, the psychologist or the therapist saying this, because I'm a therapist and I can see it. And he can see things based on the things that my husband says. I think a good therapist can see through your words to the truth. And I think this therapist could, because he had his own childhood traumas with his father. And he could see the patterns very clearly, especially because he went through all this training to become, a professional therapist. But yeah, he was like, your wife can see things very clearly because she wasn't raised in this environment. She wasn't raised in this paradigm, in this pattern of manipulation, of control, and it's just plain as day for her to see. But because, my husband was raised in it, that was normal to him. So to him, all these things that his parents have done and still do, that's just normal because that's what is familiar to him. So back to this scripture reference for today, St. Paul is talking about putting away childish ways when we become adults. And sometimes the most loving thing that we can do is to help someone see that their childhood coping mechanisms don't serve in adult relationships. Now, I definitely do not recommend you say that to your husband. Don't go to him and say, honey, your childhood coping mechanisms don't serve in our adult relationship. No, don't do that. Please don't do that. I would encourage you to have your husband seek out help, professional help, and let him know that, maybe the family that you grew up in didn't do things in the healthiest ways, but that seems normal to you, even still, now that you're an adult. So we can honor the love that our husband received and recognize that there is continuing to be harm to him and to you as his wife and to any children that you have. And I want you to realize that the feelings that you have about your husband's parents' current behaviors are valid, even as his childhood memories are also valid. You have a perspective that is very different from your husband because you didn't grow up under the same roof. You didn't grow up in those same four walls. You weren't subjected to that kind of manipulation and control day in, day out from the moment you woke up to the moment you went to bed. And you can see it clearly. But that doesn't mean that your husband can't have good memories with his family. And it doesn't mean that he can't have some moments of enjoying spending time with them now. But that doesn't negate the harm that they can be causing. I just want you, for the takeaways for this episode, just to realize that it absolutely can be true that two things are existing at the same time. That your husband feels love and has loving memories and cherished memories from his childhood or even today, even last week. And his parents can be a harmful influence on him and your family. Your in-laws could have genuinely loved your husband as a child and have established unhealthy patterns that right now are damaging your marriage today. And once we understand this paradox, it really is a powerful step towards healing. God bless you. Go in peace. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. But before you go, I want you to know something. If you're feeling exhausted after every family visit, questioning whether you're overreacting, or if you're replaying conversations you had with your in-laws for days afterward, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. I've created a free guide called 5 Signs You're Not Too Sensitive, What Your Gut is Really Telling You, that will help you to understand why these interactions feel so hard and give you some gentle scripts to use in those moments when you're caught off guard by your in-laws. You can grab a copy at desiringpeace.com/signs. That's desiringpeace.com/SIGNS. You're not asking for too much when you ask to be treated with respect. I'll talk to you next week. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and/or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.